The screams echoing from Dr. Whitmore's office weren't unusual, but tonight, they belonged to Sarah McKinnon, and they would seal her fate forever. Please, Dr. Whitmore, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not sick. Sarah's voice cracked as she pressed herself against the examination room wall, her blue shoulderless dress torn at the deep neckline from his grabbing hands. Shut your mouth, girl, Whitmore snarled, his wedding ring catching the lamplight as he reached for her again. You'll do as I say, or I'll make sure this whole town knows exactly what kind of condition you're carrying. Sarah's heart pounded. She'd come for help with her sudden weight gain and fatigue, not for this nightmare. I won't let you touch me. I'll tell everyone what you're trying to do. Whitmore's eyes turned cold as winter stone. Tell them? Who do you think they'll believe, a respected doctor or a diseased whore? He straightened his vest, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You've just signed your own death warrant, Sarah McKinnon. 3 days later, the emergency town meeting was called. Sarah sat beside her parents in the cramped church hall, every eye in Copper Ridge burning into her like brands. Her mother's hand trembled on her arm while her father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched tight. Dr. Whitmore stood at the makeshift podium, his voice carrying the authority of education and respectability. Fellow citizens, I've discovered something that threatens every soul in this town. Miss Sarah McKinnon is carrying mountain dropsy, a rare, contagious form of the disease that causes the body to swell rather than waste away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mountain dropsy was a death sentence. The infection spreads through proximity, Whitmore continued, his eyes finding Sarah's with cold satisfaction. Already, 3 counties have refused her entry. For the safety of our children, our families, she must be relocated. You're lying. Sarah shot to her feet, her voice echoing off the church rafters. He's punishing me because I wouldn't. Sarah, sit down. Her mother yanked her back into the pew, hissing, Don't make this worse for the family. Mayor Hendricks cleared his throat. Dr. Whitmore, are you absolutely certain? I stake my medical license on it, Whitmore declared. She must be removed from town limits within 3 days, or we risk losing every soul in Copper Ridge. Sarah's father finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Where would she go? That's not our concern, Whitmore said coldly. Our duty is to the living. The vote was unanimous, all except Thomas McKinnon, who couldn't raise his hand against his only daughter. That night, Sarah paced her bedroom while her mother packed with shaking hands. Mama, you have to believe me, Sarah pleaded. Dr. Whitmore tried to force himself on me. When I refused, he said he'd ruin me. This is his revenge. Her mother's face crumpled. Sarah, please, don't say such things. Dr. Whitmore is a married man, a pillar of the community. These accusations, think of our family's honor. But it's the truth. The truth. Her mother's voice broke. The truth is you're sick, and you need to accept God's will. Such talk will only make things worse. Her father appeared in the doorway, aged 10 years in 3 days. The wagon's ready. He couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't risk your mother and the town. I can't. As dawn broke, Sarah climbed into her father's wagon for the last time. The streets were empty. Not even Mrs. Patterson, who'd known her since birth, dared wave goodbye. They drove in silence to the county line, where Thomas helped her down and pressed coins into her hand, tears streaming. I love you, daughter, he whispered. God forgive me, but I love you. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with nothing but a carpetbag and a broken heart. For 7 days, she walked. Town after town turned her away the moment they heard mountain dropsy. Children threw rocks while mothers crossed themselves. She slept in barns when possible, under stars when not. By the 8th day, her feet bled through her shoes, her dress was mud-caked, and her water was gone. The Rocky Mountains loomed like the world's edge. She stumbled up a narrow trail, driven by survival instinct. Her vision blurred from exhaustion. Each step was agony, but stopping meant death, and she wouldn't give Dr. Whitmore that satisfaction. As sunset approached, she saw it, thin smoke curling from somewhere above. A cabin? She didn't care. Maybe they'd give her water before driving her away. The trail grew steeper, winding through pines that whispered warnings. Her legs gave out twice, but somehow she kept climbing, following that precious smoke like a beacon. Finally, as darkness settled, she saw a small log cabin nestled against rocky outcroppings. Warm light glowed from its single window. Sarah stumbled to the door, raised her trembling fist, and knocked. The door swung open to reveal the most intimidating man she'd ever seen, tall as a mountain pine, with muscles straining against his simple shirt and eyes holding the frontier's wildness. His dark skin gleamed in firelight, and something dangerous flickered in his gaze. This was Marcus Bear Thompson, though she didn't know his name. All she knew was that stories were true. There really was a wild man in these mountains, and she'd delivered herself to his doorstep. "Please," she whispered, swaying. "I'm dying." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn dress, desperate condition, and something deeper, wounds beyond physical exhaustion. "Well," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse but surprisingly gentle, "I reckon we'd better do something about that." But as he stepped aside to let her in, Sarah glimpsed something that made her blood freeze. Medical books on his shelf, and beside them, a letter with Dr. Whitmore's distinctive handwriting. Sarah's eyes remained fixed on Dr. Whitmore's letter as Marcus closed the door. The cabin was smaller than her bedroom back home, but radiated warmth from the stone fireplace. Animal pelts covered rough walls, and pine and wood smoke scented the air. "Sit," Marcus commanded, gesturing toward a chair by the fire. As she collapsed, Marcus poured water from a clay pitcher into a tin cup. "Slowly," he warned as she reached desperately. "Too fast and you'll be sick." Sarah forced herself to sip, though every cell screamed for more. The water was cold and clean, better than anything she'd tasted in days. While she drank, Marcus studied her with intelligent eyes, cataloging every detail of her condition. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah McKinnon." The words barely whispered. "From Copper Ridge." Something shifted in his expression, recognition that made her stomach clench. He knew the town. "And what brings a young lady from Copper Ridge to my doorstep, half dead and alone?" Sarah's hand trembled around the cup. Should she tell the truth? The lie that destroyed her life? Or create a new story? "I'm sick," she finally said. "Mountain dropsy. The town made me leave." Marcus went very still. "Mountain dropsy." His voice was flat, unreadable. "The doctor said I was contagious. That I'd kill everyone if I stayed." Tears she'd held back for days finally spilled over. "My own father drove me out. My mother wouldn't even look at me." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he moved closer, careful and deliberate, like approaching a wounded animal. "Look at me," he said softly. Sarah raised her eyes, expecting familiar fear and revulsion. Instead, she found something she hadn't seen in weeks, genuine concern. "This doctor," Marcus said slowly, "what did he look like?" "Medium height, brown hair, always wore a gold watch. Married to the banker's daughter." "Why?" Marcus's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. "Edmund Whitmore." The name fell between them like a stone into still water. Sarah stared in shock. "You know him?" "I know him." The words came out like a growl. "Question is, what did you do to cross him?" Sarah's face burned with shame. I can't say. Can't or won't." "Won't." She lifted her chin, finding some spark of defiance even exhausted. "You'll think I'm lying just like everyone else." Marcus studied her another long moment, then moved to his bookshelf. Sarah's heart hammered as he picked up Whitmore's letter, but instead of reading it, he tossed it into the fire. "I know exactly what you did," he said, watching the paper curl and burn. "You said no." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared speechless. "Whitmore's got a reputation," Marcus continued, his voice hard as granite. "Problem is he's careful about who he goes after. Poor girls, girls with no family, girls with conditions that make them easy to discredit. You believe me?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Lady, I don't just believe you. I know you." He turned from the fire. Because 3 years ago, another girl came up this mountain with the same story. And 2 years before that, another one. All supposedly carrying some rare, contagious disease that Whitmore just happened to diagnose right after they refused his advances. Sarah felt the world tilt. What happened to them? Marcus's expression darkened. First girl made it through one winter, then went back down to try clearing her name. Found her body in the spring thaw. Second girl. He paused, pain flickering across his features. Wolves got her before I could teach her proper survival skills. Horror washed over Sarah in waves. She wasn't the first. She wasn't even the second. Dr. Whitmore had been destroying innocent women for years, and no one had stopped him. "Why do you stay up here?" she whispered. "Why don't you go down and tell people the truth?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "You think they'd listen to me? A black man accusing their precious white doctor? I'd be strung up before I finished speaking." The truth of that statement settled over Sarah like a weight. Of course they wouldn't listen to him. In 1870s Colorado, a black man's word against a white doctor's was worthless. "But you," Marcus continued, "you might have a chance. If you survive long enough to fight back." Survive? Sarah looked around the sparse cabin. "You mean stay here?" "I mean learn to live. Really live." His eyes burned with intensity. "Whitmore sends women up here expecting them to die. Cold, starvation, wild animals, despair. He's counting on this mountain to finish what his lies started. But what if it didn't?" Sarah stared at him, hardly daring to hope. You'd let me stay? I'd do more than that. I'd teach you everything I know about surviving in these mountains. How to find food, make fire, defend yourself. How to become strong enough that no man, not Whitmore, not anyone, can ever break you again. But the disease. There is no disease. Marcus's voice cut through her words like a blade. You don't have mountain dropsy, Sarah McKinnon. You never did. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking but opening. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to unfurl. How do you know? Marcus moved to a wooden chest and pulled out a worn leather journal. Because I was a medic in the war. Because I've seen real mountain dropsy, and you don't have a single symptom that matches. He opened the journal, revealing pages of careful notes and sketches. What you have is probably a thyroid condition. Treatable, not contagious, and certainly not deadly. Sarah's hands flew to her throat. Thyroid. Makes you gain weight, feel tired, get cold easily. The you taught me about herbs that help balance it. He closed the journal gently. With proper care, you'll be healthier than you've ever been. The room spun around Sarah as years of fear and shame began to crumble. You can cure me? I can help you cure yourself. But it'll take time, and it won't be easy. Mountain life is hard, Sarah. Harder than anything you've ever known. Sarah thought of her father's face as he drove away. Her mother's refusal to believe her. The stones thrown by children who'd once played in her yard. The endless days of walking, rejected by everyone she met. Harder than dying alone and hated? Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. A small, grim smile that transformed his harsh features. No, I reckon it's not harder than that. He moved toward a small alcove where she could see a simple bedroll. You can sleep there tonight. Tomorrow, if you're still willing, we'll start your real education. As Sarah settled onto the surprisingly comfortable bedroll, wrapped in warm furs that smelled of wild mountain air, Marcus returned to his chair by the fire. In the flickering light, she studied his profile, the strong jaw, intelligent eyes, scars that spoke of a violent past. What's your name? She asked softly. Marcus, he replied without looking at her. Marcus Thompson. Though most folks down below call me Bear. Why Bear? Now he did look at her, and she saw something haunting in his eyes. Because that's what they called me when I was killing their friends during the war. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. You were a soldier? I was a lot of things. Soldier, medic, scout. His voice grew distant. Now I'm just a man who lives alone in the mountains, waiting for the next broken woman to climb up here looking for death. And instead finding life? Marcus stared into the fire for a long moment. We'll see, Sarah McKinnon. We'll see. As sleep began to claim her, Sarah heard Marcus moving around the cabin, banking the fire and checking the locks. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly safe. But outside, something howled in the distance, wolf or coyote, she couldn't tell. And somewhere far below, in the town of Copper Ridge, Dr. Edmund Whitmore was probably telling his wife about the tragic fate that awaited poor, diseased Sarah McKinnon. He had no idea that this time, his victim had found not death, but the most dangerous thing of all, an ally who knew the truth. Sarah woke to the sound of an axe biting into wood and the scent of something delicious cooking over the fire. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The exile, the mountain climb, Marcus Thompson. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the previous day's ordeal. Through the window, she could see Marcus splitting logs with powerful, precise swings. His shirt hung from a nearby branch, and morning light revealed the full extent of his muscled frame, along with a network of scars across his back that spoke of violence she couldn't imagine. When he noticed her watching, he pulled his shirt back on and came inside, carrying an armload of firewood. "Hungry?" he asked, stirring something in a pot hanging over the fire. "Starving." The word came out more honestly than she'd intended. Marcus ladled a thick stew into a wooden bowl. The smell made Sarah's mouth water, rich meat, wild herbs, and vegetables she didn't recognize. "Venison, wild onions, and mountain potatoes," Marcus explained, handing her the bowl. "Eat slow. Your stomach's been empty too long." As Sarah ate, Marcus settled across from her with his own bowl. "Today we start your education. First lesson, this mountain will kill you if you don't respect it." Sarah paused mid-bite. "Kill me how?" "Cold, mainly. Then there's the animals, bears, mountain lions, wolves. Water's scarce in some seasons, abundant in others. Plants that'll poison you, cliffs that'll break your neck." He counted off the dangers on his fingers like he was discussing the weather. "Oh, and people. Can't forget people. People come up here? Sometimes. Hunters, trappers, men running from the law." His expression hardened. Men looking for women they think can't fight back. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "Has anyone come looking for the other girls?" "Once." Marcus's voice was flat. "Won't happen again." Something in his tone made Sarah decide not to ask for details. The months that followed became a dance of survival and slowly blooming love, though neither spoke of the feelings growing between them. Marcus taught her to read the mountain's moods, how to identify edible plants from poisonous ones, where to find clean water even in drought, how to track animals and read weather patterns in cloud formations. Her soft hands grew calloused from woodcutting and fire building. Her body, nourished by Marcus's carefully prepared meals and strengthened by constant physical activity, began to transform. But it was the small moments that revealed their deepening connection. When Sarah cut her hand badly while learning to whittle, Marcus bandaged it with infinite gentleness, his large fingers surprisingly tender as they wrapped the wound. Their eyes met over her injured hand, and something electric passed between them before he pulled away, clearing his throat. During meals by the firelight, their hands would brush as they reached for the same item, sending jolts of awareness through both of them. Neither acknowledged these moments, but both treasured them. Sarah began mending Marcus's torn shirts, her stitches neat and careful. She would find excuses to stand close to him while he worked, breathing in his scent of pine smoke and mountain air. Marcus, in turn, began leaving small gifts by her bedroll: wildflowers, smooth river stones, a perfectly carved wooden comb. One evening in autumn, as Sarah practiced with the knife Marcus had taught her to throw, she noticed him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked, lowering the blade. "You're getting good at that." "Good enough to protect myself?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes holding hers. "Good enough to make any man think twice about hurting you." Their hands brushed as he handed her the knife back, and this time neither pulled away immediately. Marcus's fingers lingered against hers, his thumb tracing lightly across her knuckles. "Sarah," he said softly, then stopped himself, stepping back. Winter brought new challenges and new intimacies. When a blizzard trapped them inside the cabin for 3 days, they sat closer together for warmth, sharing stories by the firelight. Sarah told him about her dreams before Dr. Whitmore destroyed them. Marcus spoke of the war, the men he'd killed, the ghosts that haunted him. One night, when Marcus fell ill with fever, Sarah tended to him with the same gentle care he'd shown her. She bathed his burning forehead with cool cloths, held water to his lips, and stayed awake all night watching over him. When he woke, delirious, he caught her hand and whispered her name like a prayer. "Don't leave me," he said, his fever-bright eyes focusing on her face. "I won't," she promised, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As winter gave way to spring, their stolen glances became longer, their accidental touches more frequent. When Marcus taught Sarah to use the rifle, he stood behind her to adjust her aim, his body pressed against hers, his breath warm on her neck. Sarah leaned back against his solid warmth, and for a moment, they stood frozen in perfect stillness. "Sarah," Marcus whispered, his voice rough with longing. She turned in his arms, their faces inches apart. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, his jaw clenched with restraint. "We can't," he said quietly. "You know what would happen if anyone found out." Sarah knew. A black man and a white woman. It didn't matter that he'd saved her life, that she'd chosen to stay. In their world, such a union would mean death for both of them. But as the anniversary of her arrival approached, Sarah found herself caring less about the world's opinions and more about the man who'd taught her to be strong, to fight back, to believe in herself again. One morning in early summer, as they worked together tending the vegetable garden Marcus had taught her to plant, Sarah made a decision. "Marcus," she said, straightening from pulling weeds. "Yeah. Whatever happens, when people come looking for me, and they will, I want you to know something." Marcus stopped working, giving her his full attention. "I love you," she said simply. "I love your kindness, your strength, the way you see the good in people even after everything you've been through. I love how you taught me that I'm worth more than any man's opinion of me." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to where she knelt in the garden dirt. "Sarah McKinnon," he said softly, reaching out to cup her face in his work-roughened hands, "you are the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. And I've loved you since the day you stood up to me with nothing but courage and determination, even when you thought you were dying." This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, neither of them pulled away. But even as they finally acknowledged their love, both knew their time alone in the mountains was borrowed. Somewhere below, people were asking questions, and sooner or later, someone would come looking for Sarah McKinnon. They had no idea that day was about to arrive sooner than expected. The sound of horses' hooves echoing through the mountain passes reached them on a crisp morning in late summer, exactly 1 year after Sarah's arrival. She and Marcus had been working together to preserve meat for the coming winter, their movements now synchronized after months of shared labor and quiet intimacy. Marcus tensed at the sound, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle that was never far from his reach. 3 horses, maybe 4. Coming up the main trail. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. Who could it be? Only one way to find out. Marcus's voice was grim. "Sarah, whatever happens, remember what you've learned. You're not the same broken girl who climbed up here a year ago." As the riders came into view, Sarah recognized them with a mixture of hope and dread. Her father, Thomas McKinnon, rode in front, his face gaunt with worry and something else, determination. Behind him rode Sheriff Morrison and Dr. Whitmore, but there was also a 4th man she didn't recognize, well-dressed and official-looking. "Sarah," her father called out as soon as he spotted her. "My God, you're alive." The transformation in Sarah was immediately apparent to all of them. Gone was the pale, frightened girl they remembered. This Sarah stood straight and strong, her skin bronzed by mountain sun, her arms muscled from physical labor, her eyes clear and direct. Dr. Whitmore's face went white as he took in her obviously healthy appearance. Impossible, he muttered. The disease should have. Should have what, Dr. Whitmore? Sarah's voice rang clear across the mountain clearing. Should have killed me by now? The fourth man dismounted and introduced himself. Miss McKinnon, I'm Judge Harrison from the Territorial Court. Your father petitioned for a formal hearing regarding your situation. He's discovered some troubling information about your diagnosis. Sarah's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. What kind of information? Thomas McKinnon stepped forward, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. Dr. Whitmore's assistant came forward 3 months ago. She told me about other women who received similar diagnoses after refusing the doctor's advances. The words hung in the mountain air like an accusation. Dr. Whitmore sputtered, That's absolutely preposterous. I would never. Miss Hutchins is dead, Sarah said quietly. So is Miss Wells. And Miss Garrett disappeared completely. All of them diagnosed by you with rare, contagious diseases. All of them exiled from their communities to die alone. Judge Harrison's expression grew grave. These are serious accusations, Miss McKinnon. Do you have any proof to substantiate these claims? Sarah looked at Marcus, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. This was her moment, the choice between safety and truth that he'd been preparing her for all these months. I have proof, she said, disappearing into the cabin and returning with Dr. Whitmore's journal and several other documents. Dr. Whitmore left these during his examination of me. They detail his methods for dealing with uncooperative patients. As she began to read from the journal, her voice grew stronger with each revelation. The entries laid bare Whitmore's systematic abuse of his position, his targeting of vulnerable women, and his use of false diagnoses to eliminate those who threatened to expose him. This is outrageous, Whitmore protested. You can't trust the word of a diseased woman and her. He gestured toward Marcus with obvious disgust. Her what? Marcus stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Say what you came here to say, Doctor. Sheriff Morrison's hand moved to his gun. That's enough from you, boy. Nobody's talking to you. Actually, they are. Sarah moved to stand beside Marcus, her chin raised defiantly. Because Marcus Thompson saved my life. He's the one who recognized that I never had mountain dropsy at all, that I was suffering from a treatable thyroid condition that Dr. Whitmore deliberately misdiagnosed. Judge Harrison frowned. Mr. Thompson, what are your medical qualifications? Union Army Medic, 54th Massachusetts Infantry, Marcus replied evenly. Trained in field surgery and disease identification. I can provide documentation if needed. The 54th Massachusetts? Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose. You served with Colonel Shaw? Yes, sir. Until Gettysburg. The judge's demeanor shifted noticeably. The 54th Massachusetts was legendary, and any man who'd served with them commanded respect. Mr. Thompson, in your medical opinion, did Miss McKinnon ever suffer from mountain dropsy? No, sir. Her symptoms were consistent with hypothyroidism, a condition I've seen and treated before. With proper herbal remedies, she's made a complete recovery. Dr. Whitmore was growing desperate. You're going to take the word of a Negro over a licensed physician? The racial slur hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her, but before he could respond, she stepped forward. I'm going to take the word of the man who saved my life over the man who tried to destroy it, she said, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. And I'm going to do it publicly so that every woman in 3 counties knows what kind of monster Dr. Edmund Whitmore really is. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. Miss McKinnon, these are extremely serious allegations. If you're willing to testify under oath, we can arrange for a formal hearing. I'll testify, Sarah said immediately, and I'll demand that every woman Dr. Whitmore has treated in the past 5 years be allowed to speak as well. The color drained from Whitmore's face. This is madness. I won't stand for this persecution. Then you won't mind if we examine your medical records? Judge Harrison said coolly. All of them. What followed was the most extensive investigation the territory had ever seen. The hearing, held in Copper Ridge's largest building, drew crowds from 3 counties. One by one, women stepped forward to tell their stories of harassment, intimidation, and false diagnoses used as weapons against those who dared to refuse Dr. Whitmore's advances. Sarah's testimony was the cornerstone of the case. Standing before the packed room, she spoke with the clear, strong voice Marcus had taught her to use, telling the truth about Whitmore's attack, his threats, and the systematic way he'd used his medical authority to destroy women's lives. He told me no one would believe me, Sarah said, her eyes sweeping the silent crowd. He said I was just a diseased whore whose word meant nothing against his reputation. But I'm here to tell you that the only disease in Copper Ridge was the corruption of Dr. Edmund Whitmore. When she finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Then, slowly, other women began to stand. Women who had been too afraid to speak before, but who found courage in Sarah's example. Mrs. Henderson told of Whitmore's inappropriate touching during examinations. Miss Peters described his demands for special consultations in exchange for medical care. One by one, the stories poured out, painting a picture of systematic abuse that had gone unchallenged for years. Dr. Whitmore's defense crumbled under the weight of testimony and evidence. His medical license was permanently revoked. He was sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison, and his wife, Martha, publicly divorced him and returned to her family back east. But the hearing had another unexpected consequence. Sarah's courage in speaking out, and her year of survival in the mountains, had made her a symbol of female strength and independence. Women throughout the territories began to demand better treatment, better protection, and better recourse when men in power abused their positions. As the formal proceedings concluded, Sarah found herself facing a choice she hadn't anticipated. Her father, tears streaming down his weathered face, begged her to come home. "Sarah, please," he said. "Your mother is heartbroken. We can start over, put all this behind us. You've proven your point, now come home where you belong." Sarah looked at her father, this man who had loved her, failed her, and now wanted to reclaim her. Then she looked at Marcus, standing quietly beside her, letting her make her own choice. "I am home, Papa," she said gently. "I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it, but my home is with Marcus on the mountain. We're going to be married, and we're going to build a life together based on truth, respect, and love." The announcement sent shockwaves through the crowd. An interracial marriage was scandalous, dangerous, potentially deadly. But Sarah McKinnon Thompson, for she had already taken his name in her heart, no longer cared about scandal. She had learned something precious in her year on the mountain. The only opinion that mattered was her own. The wedding took place 1 month later, performed by a circuit judge who owed his life to Marcus's medical skills and asked no questions about the couple's unusual circumstances. Standing in the mountain clearing where Sarah had first found refuge, she and Marcus exchanged vows witnessed only by the wind in the pines and the vast expanse of Colorado sky. "Do you, Sarah McKinnon, take this man to be your husband, to honor and cherish, in sickness and in health, for better or worse?" "I do," Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. She wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, her hair crowned with wildflowers Marcus had gathered that morning. "Do you, Marcus Thompson, take this woman to be your wife, to protect and cherish, to love and honor, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Marcus replied, his deep voice carrying absolute conviction. He wore his best shirt and the only suit he owned, saved from his army days. "Then by the power vested in me by the Colorado Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." As Marcus leaned down to kiss his wife, Sarah felt a completeness she had never known possible. This man had saved her life, taught her strength, and shown her that love could transcend every barrier society tried to erect. Word of their marriage spread through the territories like wildfire, carrying with it the story of Sarah's survival and Dr. Whitmore's downfall. To some, it was a scandal of the highest order. But to others, particularly women trapped in bad situations, it became something else entirely: Hope. The first woman arrived on their mountain in early spring of the following year. Mary O'Brien was fleeing an abusive husband who'd threatened to kill her if she tried to leave. She'd heard about Sarah Thompson, the woman who had faced down her attackers and chosen her own path, and she came seeking refuge and guidance. Sarah welcomed her with open arms, teaching her the survival skills Marcus had once taught her, helping her regain the confidence that years of abuse had stripped away. When Mary was strong enough, she chose to return to Denver, but this time armed with knowledge, strength, and legal resources Sarah had helped her secure. More women followed. Some stayed only briefly, gathering strength before returning to their old lives with new courage. Others built cabins in the mountain valleys, creating a community of women who had learned that survival sometimes meant leaving everything behind. Men came too, good men who had heard about the mountain community where people were judged by their character rather than their circumstances of birth. Former slaves seeking true freedom, war veterans haunted by their memories, immigrants fleeing persecution in their homeland. All found welcome in the growing settlement that began to take shape in the high valleys. Marcus became the unofficial doctor for this expanding community, his war-trained skills and knowledge of natural remedies earning him respect his skin color had never afforded him in the world below. He treated broken bones and delivered babies, cured fevers and eased the pain of old wounds, asking nothing in return but the satisfaction of healing. Sarah became the community's voice and advocate. She organized the women, teaching them not just survival skills but self-defense, legal rights, and how to speak with authority when confronting injustice. Her story had inspired a movement spreading far beyond the mountain valleys. One particularly meaningful visitor arrived in their 4th year. Thomas McKinnon, Sarah's father, rode up the mountain trail alone, his face weathered by years of guilt and regret. Sarah met him at the same cabin where she had first found refuge, now expanded into a comfortable home she shared with Marcus and their 2 young children, a daughter named Hope and a son called Freedom. "Hello, Papa," Sarah said, her voice warm but cautious. Thomas dismounted slowly, his eyes taking in the thriving community visible in the valley below, the obvious happiness in his daughter's face, the healthy children playing in the garden. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I came to apologize. And to ask your forgiveness." "You have it," Sarah replied simply. "You always had it, Papa. But forgiveness doesn't erase the consequences of choices." "I know." Thomas looked around at the community his daughter had helped build. "Your mother, she died last winter. Pneumonia. Before she passed, she made me promise to come find you, to tell you how proud she was of what you'd accomplished." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. Despite everything, she had loved her mother. "She also asked me to give you this," Thomas continued, pulling a small package from his saddlebag. Inside was her mother's wedding ring and a letter, written in a shaking hand. "My dearest Sarah," the letter read, "I was wrong to tell you to stay quiet. I was wrong to value our family's reputation over your safety and truth. You have become the woman I should have taught you to be, strong, brave, unafraid to speak truth to power. I am so very proud of you, and I hope someday you can forgive a foolish old woman who loved you more than life but failed you when you needed her most." Sarah wept as she read, Marcus's strong arm coming around her shoulders in comfort. "She wanted you to know," Thomas said quietly, "that the changes you started didn't end with Dr. Whitmore. The women of Copper Ridge organized after your testimony. They demanded better protection, better recourse when men abuse their power. They've even elected a woman to the town council, the first in territorial history." Sarah looked up through her tears. "A woman? Who?" "Mrs. Patterson. The woman who used to know you as a child. She said it was your courage that inspired her to speak up." Thomas stayed for 3 days, witnessing a community where disputes were settled through discussion rather than violence, where children were taught to value character over appearance, where women and men worked as equals. When he prepared to leave, he embraced his daughter and son-in-law with genuine warmth. "I was wrong about everything," he told Marcus. "You're a good man, and you've made my daughter happier than I ever did." "She made herself happy," Marcus replied. "I just had the privilege of being there to see it." By their 5th anniversary, the mountain community had grown to nearly 300 souls across multiple valleys. They had established a school where children of all colors learned together, a general store operating on honest trade, and justice based on fairness rather than prejudice. Visitors came from across the nation to see this unusual community where former enemies worked side by side, where women held property in their own names, and where skin color mattered less than character. As Sarah stood on her porch that evening, watching the sun set over peaks that had become home to so many seeking freedom, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, settling beside his wife as their children played nearby. Sarah looked out over their community, at gardens and workshops, the school and meeting hall, faces of people who had found freedom in the high country. She thought about the terrified woman who had climbed this mountain 6 years ago, and about the ripple effects one act of courage had created. "None," she said firmly, leaning into her husband's warmth. "Not a single one." The mountains had offered them sanctuary. In return, they had offered proof that a better world was possible, built one brave choice at a time. Sarah Thompson's story became legend throughout the American territories, inspiring countless women to find their voices and demand better treatment. The mountain community she and Marcus built became a model for integration and women's rights that influenced policy changes across the nation. Dr. Whitmore's imprisonment marked the beginning of legal protections for women that spread throughout the territories. Most importantly, their love story proved that the human heart recognizes no boundaries of race or circumstance, only the truth of genuine connection between souls brave enough to choose love over convention. If this story touched your soul, subscribe to Ironwood Narratives to support powerful stories like this one.